Welcome. Hi, I'm Kelly Matthews, and I have with me a friend that I got to study with for several years, Susie Flory. Welcome. How you doing?
Great to see you, Kelly.
We live so far apart, so this is a great treat just to kind of hang out and get to talk via this fun thing called Substack. Um, you live out in the beautiful area of or you tell me, the Sequoias in California? Like, give me a
We
little
don't
more.
I we do actually have a sequoia on our property, which we planted, and it's a baby. But
Okay.
we live in they look like redwood trees, but they're actually cedars, and they're
Mhm.
called incense cedars, and they used to make pencils with them. So
Oh, the
that's
kind
my
that smell
trivia.
good. I just know it's a really pretty mountainous area. It's the middle of April while we record this. You probably won't see this until summer, but she just got more snow. So just the seasons are crazy, and you just never know what you're going to get up there. I remember this winter you had so much snow, like the mere mortals who live in the South just can't even comprehend how much you had.
Yeah, it was horrible. We had a storm that dumped 5 feet, and people's trees were breaking off just because it
Oh,
got so heavy. So just you would try to drive down the road, and there's just these trees like little matchsticks broken over, including on our property. So yeah, it was
I'm sure.
crazy.
I am sure that that just doesn't even compute 5 feet. Well, we're going to talk more about the fact that you live in a remote area. You were telling me earlier is a little bit of a challenge for the work you do. Tell us what kind of work are you doing, and what are you known for? What have you been doing with your career over the last couple of decades or more?
Yeah. So I'm really grew up in the suburbs of the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm not a native mountain girl, although my family loved the mountains. So we did
Yeah.
go there. You're either like a mountain person or a beach person. We were mountain people, so we were up there all the time. I also was really lucky I got to grow up with horses. My dad is from Texas, not too far from where we
Nice.
got to go to school together, a little town called LaGrange. And so he always loved horses, but he was super poor growing up. So as soon as he got his job, he went to college, got his job in California, moved his wife out there, my mom, and got a horse as soon as he could afford it,
Oh,
which is when I was a little girl. So
I love
I
it.
was very, very lucky to grow up with horses in the suburb of the San Francisco Bay Area, which seems weird.
It
So I
doesn't sound like
really
it goes together.
no, he just kind of like had a little slice of Texas going on there. And it was just, like Little House on the Prairie, basically, type of upbringing. And I always loved words. I always loved reading. I was a total bookworm. So if I wasn't out doing that type of stuff, I was at home reading, and my mom would just, kind of tear her hair out because she'd say, "You always have your nose in a book." So that love never left me. And, like you probably do, my house is filled with books, and I was so blessed to be able to go to seminary. I
Yeah.
started out writing. I was a typesetter at my college newspaper. So back in the day where you had to have a typesetter, and then did some newspaper writing for a couple of
Mhm.
years out of college. And really, I think that's where I connected with the idea of writing and connected with writers. Because I mean, let's be honest, writers are a little weird, but they're my kind of weird. Like I get them, and I
Yeah.
felt like I fit somewhere for the
Mhm.
first time in my life, really. And
What
so from
kind
that,
of what
go
kind of
ahead.
writing did you do, for the newspaper? Were you a journalist? Were you a feature? Like, what was it?
Yeah, I was in features. Like I was still in college and started working for $5 an hour and was doing anything and everything, typing up stories from press releases and stuff like that. But I did graduate and get to do feature writing, and I found I really loved interviewing, and I
Mm.
really loved people's stories, because I remember even now interviewing some person who had done something or was interesting, given the assignment, hey, go talk to this person. And you would find out things that were not obvious, right? So I just got the feeling that it was like a treasure hunt. And I want to get these things that this person has, to tell, but maybe aren't obvious. So I just fell in love with And I was curious too, so it really
Yeah.
fit my
Yeah.
personality. So I loved
Okay.
doing that. Yeah.
That sounds exactly like what's happening right now. I did not know that that was your start, that it was being an interviewer for a newspaper. So this is very, apropos here. So, so that's what we're
And
doing. We're learning a little bit about each other, and I love that
yeah,
this is something
and
new. I love it.
yeah, and actually when I write now, I always love interviewing, and the same exact thing, whether I'm interviewing someone who's been dead for thousands of years, right?
Right.
Because that's what it feels like when you are doing scholarly investigation and research. I feel like I'm looking for that treasure. So it's really a similar feeling to me. So kind of funny.
Mhm.
I was married, I had kids, and could not really work full time in that line of work. I worked part time and was taking care of my kids. I know some women can do it. I could not.
Mhm.
And I came back around to it. Um, just that desire never left me, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to write. And eventually I came back around to writing stories, interviewing people, and trying to find the story behind the story. So that's really, I think, the thread that, runs through all my writing, my books, and what I'm doing today, what I did in seminary.
Okay. So I pretty much forgot to introduce the topic here. So I'm going to segue this in. You're watching, whether it's on the day I publish it or, however many months later you find this, part of my series on Doctor of Ministry graduates. Susie is Dr. Susie now because she and I graduated together back at Houston Christian University. And so I am exploring the paths that women in particular take who end up in a DMin program. So let's go there. So you've been a writer, you got back into the profession after the kids were big enough. And then what got you to seminary and then eventually to decide a DMin was where you needed to go?
Yes, I can point to, I think, two things that sort of pointed me towards that path. When I was about 17, my mom had a best friend who was she did occupational therapy, and I can't remember if she was actually a therapist or she worked with one. And she had these really cool, robust aptitude tests. So you could take this test, it would ask you all these questions, and then they sent it off to be scored, because it couldn't be done at home in that day. And it came back and it said, it recommended two choices for me. One was a vocational minister, clergy member,
Okay.
and one was a journalist. And so I
Okay.
looked at that and I kind of laughed because the context I was in, I had never seen a woman in the clergy at the pulpit, other than maybe women's ministry. That was it. So I was just like, oh my gosh, this must be a mistake. They don't know I'm a woman.
I
And
forgot that part. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so I just like, if I could have just torn that off, I would have torn it off. I totally disregarded it. The other one was, I thought, well, writing related, maybe I can do something with that. So that I didn't like become a full-time journalist, but those two things were always just kind of in the back of my mind, just like a
Okay.
little, little
Mhm.
benchmark kind of thing. And then later on, when I was writing my first book, I happened to cross paths with a New Testament scholar, and his name was Ward Gask, and
Okay.
he specialized in New Testament. He had studied under this famous scholar named F.F. Bruce,
I've heard of
who was,
him.
yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, he's written a ton of stuff and was really well known for being an expert on the Dead
Yeah.
Sea Scrolls. And so I ran across him, became friends with him in an unlikely way. And he wrote the foreword for my first book and also became a mentor. Like
Mhm.
literally, he just kind of popped up out of nowhere through a connection. And so at one point, I was talking to him and I could ask him any question. And that was not the case in the church I grew up in. You just didn't
Right.
ask the hard question.
Yeah.
Or if you did, they didn't like it. So I could ask him anything. So I asked him all my hard questions. And a lot of times he would just say, well, I don't know, but I do know this, and he was just honest, which I loved.
Okay.
And so it showed me kind of that scholarly inquiry where you go in and try to study without too much bias, as much as you
Mhm.
can, kind of shed that and have an open mind about what you're going to find. He also told me, he also said to me one day, "Have you ever thought about going to seminary?" And I
Mm.
felt like I did when I heard the results of the test. Like, you're kidding. Like,
Mm.
seminary for me, that's not an option. But again, it stuck with me. And so later on, when I, started to think about it, which was in my 40s, I think,
Mhm.
late 40s, I started to think about it.
Okay. So late 40s, these these voices are kind of coming back to you and saying, okay, were you at a transition point in your career or was sort of just merging with what you were already doing that when you finally decided to go get your master's?
Yeah, so my kids were a little bit older, like in their adolescence and teens. And so I was thinking into the future, like, what am I gonna do?
Mhm.
I don't love housework and I don't love cooking. I don't love all
Susie,
that
this
stuff.
is one of the other reasons we're friends.
I
You're
know.
like, this is my life. The
So
reading, yeah, all of it.
I
Go ahead.
know. I wanted to do something more than that, and it's just
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with that. My mom, did that.
Sure.
It just wasn't me.
Yeah.
So I was starting to think in that direction. I became a writer. So I wrote some articles, then, started down trying to figure out what I was gonna do, writing a few books. And then, I became interested in women of the Bible. So
Okay.
I went to a seminar at a local study center, and I think it was called Women of the Bible, something like that. Yeah. And we read an essay by F.F. Bruce about women in the Bible
Yeah.
that's really famous. You can find it online. And literally, after I read the first page, I started bawling. I was just bawling
Do
because
you
I'll never.
remember do you
Yes.
remember enough to recall why
Yeah, so he
specifically?
basically it was an oral thing where someone had asked him a question and he just, said all this stuff and then they put it in this essay. But someone had asked him about Eve in the Garden of Eden and the order of creation and the temptation, and he really opened it up to me in a way that I had never heard, because I grew up thinking that Eve was created second because she was not the primary person, right? She's a support person, so she's just kind of almost like an afterthought.
Mhm.
Adam needs a wife. And then the second part of it was, I had always been under the impression, whether it was taught to me or hinted at, that she was to blame for
Oh, yeah.
sin
Mhm.
entering the world. So when I read what he said about it, and I can't repeat it, it's too, he makes an
Too
argument.
complex.
I felt like a weight lifted off of me.
Okay. So some
I mean,
freedom there. Yeah.
mhm, that it was not my gender was not we were not carrying that burden anymore.
Mhm.
And I just cried over it.
Mm.
I cried.
And that sent you to seminary?
That, I think, was a huge part of it. From then on, I wanted to know more. And he does go on in that essay to talk about some of the New Testament women as well. And I just realized I'd never studied these women. I didn't know anything about them. And there was a whole world out there that I wanted to know more about.
Okay.
And so, as you know, I ended up going to Northern Seminary for my master's. When I was 53, I started. And I, knew Scott McKnight was there. I had read his book, The Blue Parakeet. I knew that he loved this topic as well, and I wanted to study with him. I didn't know any of the other teachers.
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody at all.
Yeah.
I took, a huge risk. I felt like doing it, but it really was that exact line of just, I wanted to know these women.
So you get through, how long was the master's? 2 to 3 years, or did you do the
It
slow
was
route?
4.
4
Yeah,
for you. Okay.
4
So
years. Yeah.
did you roll right into your doctorate of ministry at that point, or did you have a little time?
Yeah. I did. At some point I started to narrow my topic down. So I
Sure.
knew that I wanted to be New Testament only. and began to look at this question of women writers in the ancient world.
Okay.
And
You
so, or
can't
in the world of the Bible. Yeah.
you can't do that as a master's student. You're pretty much locked
No,
into whatever they tell you to study, what classes they want you to
that's
take. But
right.
when you're in the doctoral program, you get much more freedom to narrow. Freedom to narrow. It does work that way.
Mhm.
Just the focus of what you're actually studying. And so, Doctor of Ministry, you moved right into that program, and I'll just spoil it. You started under Dr. Lynn Cohick because you and I started together
That's right.
at Northern, and within a year, things there had shifted quite a bit, and
Mhm.
Dr. Cohick moved to Houston Christian, and they made a way for any of her students to follow her should they wish to, and several of us did. Several did not. Like we all kind of went our separate ways, but you and I and one other friend who will be on another time uh, ended up in Houston. So what was your experience? I mean, let's put aside the fact that it was a little bit divided, and that's an unusual aspect of it that most students aren't going to experience.
Right.
Uh, what you could tell us, if you wish, what made you decide to make the switch and not just stay at Northern?
Yeah, so I was narrowing that topic, like
Hmm.
we've just been discussing, and then went from women to certain types of women to, narrowed very, very much down to this particular type of woman in the biblical world and beyond. And my demon would have been under either Lynn, but Lynn left, or
Hmm.
under Scott. And I adore Scott. He's the best
Hmm.
teacher ever, but he's not a specialist in this area. He's written about it a lot, but Lynn had this deep, knowledge
Hmm.
and area. It's her area of scholarship, women in this time period. So, and also Lynn, had created the Center for Women in Leadership. That was the degree we were pursuing at Northern before
Hmm.
we came
Yeah.
over to Houston. And I just felt like I wanted to support what she was doing and also benefit from it and be
Mhm.
around the people who would be in that program. So
Okay.
I wanted to hang out with you more, Kelly, and
Right.
with our
Sure.
classmate and with those who were going to study with Lynn.
Yes. Okay. So this is, I think it's interesting that you're not the first one to say that just as PhD students tend to follow a professor, that
Mhm.
a doctor of ministry can be the same way. It's a different degree, and there's a different process and a different focus, but it is possible and sometimes preferable to kind of hitch yourself to a scholar who is in the field that you want to study and that you want to dive deeper in, because we know that the projects that we eventually end up creating can look really different.
Mhm.
So you don't have to follow a specialist in your area, but you can. And that was kind of a new discovery for me as I was going through the program, that it was okay to say, I want to follow this particular scholar because of the expertise she brings to the area, because that's going to be my area, that kind of thing. So good to know that was you as well. So give us more specifically about your research. Tell us what your dissertation title is, if you remember it or have it in front of you, or at least the focus of what you were studying and why.
Yeah, my title is kind of long, as these are,
Okay.
these subtitles. My title of my dissertation was She Wrote, and the subtitle is Women Writers in the Ancient World and the Implications for Women's Contributions to the Writing of Biblical Texts, especially the Gospels.
That is a long subtitle. I love it. Yeah, yeah, that's fun. I'm glad you could read it, because I'd be impressed if you remembered it
I know.
verbatim. So you wanted to talk about and research women who wrote in the distant past. Like, how do we know that they wrote? Do we have records that they wrote? So now I'm cheating because I got to listen to your oral presentation at the end, but you obviously know it so much better. So what are some of the highlights that you'd be willing to talk about?
Yeah, so I grew up thinking that women in the ancient world were illiterate. And I don't know if that's something I just, made up or was actually taught
Nope.
or was just assumed,
You
you
didn't
know?
make it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I'll never forget the first day of my master's program with Scott McKnight. I'm sitting there scared to death, because I didn't think I belonged, but he said something that I wrote down and really hit me. So this was another one of those little, sort of stepping stones or benchmarks, and he said, Mary's stories, he said, some of the stories we have in the New Testament could have only come from women. Mary's stories
Mhm.
came from her. The stories around Mary came from her.
Yeah.
And it was just a light bulb moment for me. It just opened up my eyes to wondering, could Mary have been a writer? Was
Was
she telling her story?
was this around the time he was writing, is it The Real Mary, for the
No,
book
he
he
had
wrote
written
about her?
that.
That was
Yeah,
earlier.
he wrote that
Okay,
like 10 years before, and he
okay.
said it sunk without a trace, like no one was
Nobody wanted to
interested.
talk. Well, I'm gonna try to revive it because obviously, my dissertation was all about Mary. So
Mhm.
not to get off on that, but she was one of the reasons that it clicked in your head to think more deeply about women in
Absolutely.
writing. Keep going.
Yeah, and I do talk about her in the dissertation. I
Mhm.
mean, she's a huge part of, what I'm arguing in the New Testament. She's the most prominent woman in the New Testament. So I love that you did your dissertation on her.
So
So yeah, so he said that kind of, got me curious and interested. And then I happened to go to a museum with my husband when I was working on this dissertation. I was trying to read everything, study everything, and they had a woman writer from Mesopotamia. And so this is from 3400 BC, so long, long time ago. And her name was Enheduanna. She was a princess and a high priestess. Her father was Sargon, who was the head of these 40 city states. So he had this huge empire. They were really kind of getting organized with technology. It was a time of growth with civilization, and she's over all these, what we would call churches, temples, kind of like the pope of her time in that particular religion. She had her own scribe that we know by name because it's recorded and carved into stone. And she wrote psalms, she wrote poetry, she wrote argument, she wrote her memoir, and we have it all in cuneiform form, clay tablets that have been dug up from the deserts of Iraq, including at least one image of her and perhaps more. So she was literate, what we would call literate in the ancient world. Did she actually write herself? We don't know because she was a princess. So she had
Mhm.
a secretary, which
Yeah,
was her scribe,
yeah.
and dictated because this is an oral culture. So that just finding that, seeing that at the museum, seeing these images, seeing all of this, reading her words, which are very literary. They're not
Mm.
like I am Enhodwana, I am the queen. It's not like that. It's like reading David's Psalms. They're gorgeous.
Mm.
I just thought, if she was doing this thousands of years before Mary Magdalene, before Johanna, before, these women who worked with Paul, they could have been writing too. It really opened the door of my mind and that spirit of inquiry and investigation.
Okay, that's fascinating. So help us understand when you said, was she writing? Maybe not, she had a scribe. Help us understand the idea of what literacy meant in, I don't know, where would you like to divide the line? But modern day versus or medieval on up and ancient.
Yeah, I think once the technology was more available to more people, and once education had become more prevalent, and once the written word began to be more prized,
Mhm.
but in this time period, for thousands of years, it was an oral culture.
Yes.
So that was much more valued. Oral testimony was considered much more trustworthy and what you would want to hear from a firsthand witness,
Mhm.
whatever needed to be said or whatever they were sharing with you. And I know you just came back from Ireland, and Ireland still has vestiges of an oral culture with their
Sure.
poetry and their
Yeah.
singing in the pubs and their high value for, reciting and
Mm.
telling stories and all of that. So
So
that's how
much.
history And, these records were passed down as orally by people who carried that. At some point, it becomes written, but still oral was, prized above all. And we know, like Paul had a scribe. His scribe is named and referred to. And so it's very likely that most of the New Testament was written by people who were not the ones telling the stories and writing the history. So scribes were just part of the whole writing process, and it was all collaborative. So it could be that a scribe would be correcting your grammar and maybe changing it out for a different word and all of that, and maybe discussing it with you. And it's interesting, scribes could be very educated and kind of high level people like an Ezra in the Old Testament, or they could be a slave that had been trained to just take dictation, and that could be male or female. But we know from the time of Enheduanna, there were female scribes around. And so that just blew my mind that there were.
Yeah, you blew our minds too as we listened to you present your paper. So I think the clarification is that when we say someone wrote, we mean they were the source of the information.
Correct.
They were the ones either telling it or actually writing it. It doesn't matter which, because
That's
if
right.
we think of Paul, on some of his letters at the end, he might sign it with a "Look how I write my name with my big hand," in large letters, meaning he didn't write the rest of it physically. He was dictating it. And then he came in at the end and signed his name.
And that's really accepted in the scholarly world,
yes,
that dictation equals writing. But to us, it seems weird. We, because we have our computers, we have our paper, we can write,
I will say that when I'm in the midst of writing and I'm getting behind, or when something comes to me and I'm nowhere near a computer, I will pull out my handy dandy phone and dictate thoughts and just start talking into my notes app. That's dictation. And then I can also talk to my computer and watch the words appear on the screen. That's a form of dictation. Did I type them all out? Nope. But to me, it makes complete sense. So if Mary or Mary Magdalene are dictating or talking out loud, this is what happened, and Luke is there doing the writing, yes, he becomes the name on the gospel itself, but his source material may have come directly from any number of these characters, these folks that are, and you can tell through the context of the stories, well, how would he know this? Or, these are some real intimate details. How is he going to know these things? Because yes, God's inspired, but it came through the work of the humans and the Spirit inspiring them to do the writing, do the thinking, do the communicating. So of course, Mary had to tell him something, or he had to learn it from her somehow, right?
Yeah, and these women were telling their stories, right? Like, wouldn't you want to? I would want to hear Mary's story if I was anywhere near her and had heard of her and knew she was in a location. I would, drop everything and go hear the story. I have a feeling she told her story hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Yeah, and we know she was in the early church, so she was there for everything.
Sure, she was very highly beloved by the original generation. So moving forward, like, you've done the research, you've established that there were women who were literate, who were writing. We have some of their writings just under other people's names, and there's plenty more to be unearthed. But what are you mentioned implications for today in your subtitle. So tell us something about that.
So am in my heart, I love writers. I have been encouraged myself and helped along the way, because writing is hard. It's not only hard to actually write, but it's hard to be published as well. And the whole process is confusing and can be disheartening, and rejection comes with it. And, it's just, I don't know, for someone who loves books, and I know you do too, it's hard, it's emotional. And so to me, knowing that women have been writing for thousands of years, that we have been able to learn and grow and speak into what's going on around us and tell our stories. I just find that personally encouraging.
Mhm.
It's not a recent invention. Women have always been writing. So the implication is if women have always been writing, and if they've been educated enough or had resources enough to have a scribe, to form their thoughts, to read, because if you write in a literary way, you are a reader. You have been reading and influenced
Yeah.
by other things. So if that's the case, then why wouldn't women be part of doing that in the whole biblical era? The Old Testament and New Testament, there's a very long stretch of years there. We know tons of women, they're named in the Bible, which is unusual. And, for literature at that time, why wouldn't they have been telling their stories? Their stories are written down by them or others, and they are contributing to the writing of the Bible. To me, it just changes the entire narrative. And it says that men and women have been partnering in the
Mhm.
story of God and telling the story of God. And God has been using women in that way and many other ways as well from the beginning. It's just, it blew my mind and still does.
And by extension, he can still do the same today, right?
Absolutely. You can
Yeah.
collaborate with God today in your writing. You can you can have a voice no matter
Mm.
what culture you're in, what church you're in, what country you're in. You have a voice and you can write.
I love that. I love that. What would you tell, a woman who is thinking about theological higher education? What would be an encouragement, but also maybe, something for them to think about?
Hmm. I never thought it was for me. To me,
Mm,
it seemed like this sort of locked door that I couldn't go into. I think one of the most exciting things for women is that you can now go to school online.
yes.
So it used to be you would have to move to be near a school, come up with all kinds of money, maybe quit your job or come up with money to pay for school and wherever you're going to live, and then go to school. That has completely changed. So you can from anywhere in the world. I mean, we had someone from Australia in my
Yeah.
master's course who would
Yeah.
join us at 3 a.m. And he was a veterinarian. It's
Oh,
just the
wow.
coolest. It was the coolest thing. You can go to school and you can learn and grow. You can start small. You
Mhm.
can dip your toe in the water and take a class or go to seminary now at Northern. It's like the Netflix of
Mhm.
theological teaching by great professors and, watch some videos of the lectures. You can get books online. You don't
Yeah.
have to live by a theological library. I definitely don't. And you can connect with people in your program through
Mhm.
technology. Really, all you need is a phone, which most of us have access to a phone,
Mhm.
and to be able to do that. So I would say the barriers are very, very low. And it opens up a whole new world of development, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally. You can see what's exciting and interesting to you, and you will meet amazing people.
So those are the positives. I love that the accessibility of it is actually
Mhm.
that's an excellent point, because that has been such a barrier for so long.
Yeah.
And a PhD program is generally, structured to do what you said, to kinda uproot yourself, go, stay for a
Mhm.
long time, and then, completely devote yourself to your studies intensely, at least until your, dissertation writing. And that is impractical for many women. It
Mhm.
was for me, even though I would have loved it. There was just no way to do that.
Yeah.
No matter, the fact that I lived in a very large city at that point, it didn't matter. There wasn't anything nearby, to fit. So for me, a doctor of ministry was the next alternative to look at and go, okay, well, what is this versus the PhD?
Mhm.
And then of course finding Dr. Cohick's program, that was an easy segue for me. So great encouragement. Anything do you have any warnings or any kind of don't forget kind of ideas of, the hardships that come with it? I don't know. You don't have to, but it's a school
I was
program. So
scared. I mean, were you scared when you started school, or did you?
no, but only because I had been waiting so long to go back.
Aw.
And I was around a lot of theological people all the time. So I always felt like I had my toe in it, but I was never
Mm,
really in it
yeah.
myself. And so I had been waiting for a long time. So I wasn't scared about the study, but it was more of the whole newness of it. It was a different community, it was a different
Hmm.
seminary, that sort of like, I'm going to be stretched in ways and read different kinds of
Hmm.
thoughts than what I was used to. So in that sense, I was a little nervous, but I was more eager to go. But you
Yeah.
came from a different situation. So
I
yeah, I didn't.
didn't have, yeah, I wasn't really connected with theological people. Other than I had that, wonderful friendship with
Mhm.
Ward Gas. He later got Alzheimer's. So, I just had
Oh,
those few
God be
years
with
with
him.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was such a gift to me. Yeah, I think my fear was, can I do this? I
Mm-hmm.
felt old at 53, but there
Yeah.
were people older than me.
There
So,
you go. That's right.
and I
Yep.
thought, can I write these papers? Can I understand this? Can I get up to speed? And you don't know until you try if you
Yeah.
can do it. So
Yeah.
I tried, and come to find out, everyone else was scared too. And so,
Exactly. And you know what? I think the DBIN structure is really perfect for people like you and like me. We have community.
mhm,
And because writing,
yep,
as you well know, is best done in community. If you're a writer, you
mhm,
need an editor.
yep,
You need someone to bounce your ideas off of. And in a cohort, which is how it's set up, you join with a group of people. You work through the classes together as
yep,
the years go by, and you might break off at the end for some electives, but generally you're just always together. So
yes,
you have this bond. And we still have a text thread going with our 10 solid friends, all of us together, even though some of us graduated a year ago, some of us a few months ago, and that we're just friends. And so while you're in school, it's such a gift to know that you're not alone and that you can ask questions and you have someone right beside you going through the same thing.
that's right. And all kind of in different areas of ministry. We weren't like cookie
Yeah.
cutter people. That's beautiful too. We have the perspectives of different people, but I feel like it's friends for life in the
Hmm.
cohort. And
Hmm.
to me, it's equally as important as whatever knowledge and whatever
Yeah.
experiences it is, these friendships, these people you get to know. And as you hear things about the church, we hear this all the time, people complaining, people deconstructing, just all the things going on in the world. It gives me hope for the church, the
Good.
cohort, and the people I
Yeah,
met.
I agree. Well, do you have plans to turn that dissertation into a book for the regular people? I'm going to
I
assume
do.
that's a yes,
I
knowing you.
do. Yeah, and partly,
Good.
Kelly, I have to thank you because you had done an article on your Substack about my
Oh,
presentation,
yeah.
which I was so, just blessed
Oh, I
by.
cried at in a good way for a good reason. And I was so moved. Of course, I had to write about it. What happened?
Yeah, I was so grateful. So, an editor reached out, which I've been writing for 20 years. An editor reached out. So, we'll be coming out in fall of 2027 as a book. And
But
it's
you're
within a,
already in the middle of it. That's
yeah,
awesome.
I have to rewrite some of the really,
Sure.
because I have a whole chapter about my spreadsheet and methodology. It's not that interesting. So,
Oh no,
yeah.
it was amazing. But I get it. It
Yeah.
only for a certain subset of people.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely some work that needs to be done there. But yeah, and I just joined Society for Biblical
Yeah.
Literature, SBL. I've never been. I'm so excited to go and just sort of, keep learning and growing.
Oh, I love it. Well, I'll get to see you there, Lord willing, in Denver later this year.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Okay, so book coming out in a year plus.
Hmm.
And don't worry, I will add some of what Susie has already written, put her website and her Substack out, in the notes below when you'll see this video. So you will have plenty of ways to connect with Susie. thanks so much for being here and for sharing your journey through the DMin program. I just love it.
I love it too. I felt like a kid in a candy store the whole time I was in school.
Oh, yeah, it's fun to talk about your stuff, like your research. You're like, "Ooh, it's back." Well, you take care. I will I'm sure I will talk to you well before November. So, all
Thanks,
right.
Kelly.
Thanks for being here.